There is a finding buried inside 50 years of peer-reviewed neuroscience research that the personal finance industry has never shown you. Not because it is obscure. Because it is uncomfortable. And it dismantles the foundational assumption driving every savings goal, every net worth milestone, and every retirement projection you have ever built. The finding is this. The moment you become a millionaire, your brain will immediately begin working against you. And the neuroscience has known this since 1971. Read these exact words carefully, because what follows is not motivational content. It is a mechanistic map, sourced to Princeton, to Kahneman and Tversky, to Vanguard's research division, and to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, of exactly what wealth does to the human brain, the human body, and the human relationships surrounding it. The mechanisms and clinical data presented here represent population-level research findings for educational purposes only. Individual financial and psychological experiences vary significantly. Consult a licensed financial professional and a qualified mental health professional for personalized guidance. Now, follow this curve carefully, because this is where the entire conventional narrative collapses. In 1971, psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell published the foundational research establishing what they called the Hedonic Treadmill Model. The central finding, later extended by Ed Diener and colleagues in 2006, is precise and devastating. Humans return to a genetically determined happiness baseline within 12 to 18 months of any major positive life event, including winning the lottery, receiving a significant inheritance, or crossing a net worth threshold they spent a decade working toward. Notice this diverging line on screen right now. On the left side, your net worth curve climbing steadily upward over 20 years, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million. On the right side, your reported happiness score moving in a completely different direction. Flat. Returning to baseline. The two lines never converge. That gap between them, the space between financial achievement and emotional payoff, is not a personal failure. It is your brain functioning exactly as 50 years of peer-reviewed research predicted it would. The Charles Schwab Modern Wealth Survey and Federal Reserve data both confirm the inversion that makes this even more counterintuitive. Americans with higher net worth report lower financial security scores than Americans with significantly less money. Pop that number into bold and read it again. More money. Less secure feeling. Not anecdotally. Statistically. Across thousands of surveyed households. The conventional promise of wealth, that accumulation produces peace, fails at the biological level before the ink dries on the brokerage statement. But the mechanism goes deeper than a happiness baseline. The deeper engine is dopamine, and neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz documented exactly how it betrays you. Schultz's landmark 1998 research on dopamine prediction error revealed that the dopamine system fires most intensely not during the receipt of a reward, but during the anticipation of it. Follow this dopamine spike timeline as it builds. During the years of working toward $1 million, the automated contributions, the market watching, the quarterly rebalancing, your dopamine system is releasing continuously, rewarding the pursuit itself. Then the milestone arrives. And the spike collapses toward zero. Your brain already spent the neurochemical reward during the journey. Robert Sapolsky's reward neuroscience confirms this mechanism consistently. The destination releases less dopamine than the path leading to it. This is exactly why the moment feels flat. This is the biology, not the biography. Now compare these two neural decision profiles side by side. On the left side, a person operating from limbic system dominance, the brain region governing immediate reward, emotional reactivity, and present bias decision-making. On the right side, a person with sustained prefrontal cortex engagement, governing long-term planning, delayed gratification, and compound reasoning. Research from Princeton's Neuroscience Laboratory, published by McClure and colleagues in 2004, established that these two brain regions operate as competing neural circuits. The limbic system fires intensely for immediate rewards. The prefrontal cortex governs long-term planning. Compound interest, the mathematical engine of every wealth-building strategy, requires sustained prefrontal dominance over 20 to 30 years against continuous limbic system pressure. This is not a character problem. Princeton proved it. Every time you have felt unable to stop lifestyle inflation despite knowing better, that was your limbic system outrunning your prefrontal cortex in a documented neurobiological competition. The cure is structural, not motivational. Automation removes the limbic system from the equation entirely. Phase 1 of any serious wealth architecture begins there, removing the decision from the emotional circuitry before the limbic system can intercept it. Coming up at the 7-minute mark, the statistical profile of a real American millionaire will destroy every assumption you currently hold. But first, the compounding mathematics must be mapped against the biological timeline, because the $100,000 threshold is not arbitrary. A 7% average annual return, $10,000 invested at age 30 becomes approximately $149,000 by age 65. The same $10,000 invested at age 40 becomes $76,000. The difference is not discipline. The difference is time. The compounding curve accelerates at an inflection point visible on this chart, around the $100,000 to $200,000 range, where the portfolio begins generating returns that exceed the annual contribution. That is the moment the prefrontal cortex starts winning structurally. Getting to that inflection point is the entire early game. And now the data on who actually gets there. Thomas Stanley's research, updated by Sarah Stanley Fallaw in The Next Millionaire Next Door, and cross-referenced against IRS statistics of income data, produces a statistical profile that demolishes the social media version of wealth. Examine this myth-reality comparison panel. Left side, the social media millionaire archetype, luxury vehicle, urban penthouse, multiple income streams visible from a phone. Right side, the documented statistical profile. 89% of American millionaires are first-generation wealth builders. 79% received zero inheritance. The average household income of a U.S. millionaire is $131,000 per year, not $500,000. Most drive used vehicles. Most live in homes valued under $400,000. The wealth is invisible because it was never converted into visible consumption. The boring strategy, automated index fund contributions, 20+% savings rates, compound patience, is the strategy the data confirms repeatedly. Not the exception. The documented statistical norm. Locked inside the next section is the data on how wealth changes the people around you, and the neuroscience explains why with precision. But first, the loss aversion architecture that nobody in this space has ever quantified for you. Kahneman and Tversky's 1979 foundational prospect theory research established the loss aversion coefficient at approximately 2.25 times. Losses feel 2.25 times more psychologically painful than equivalent gains feel pleasurable. Now follow this pain amplification curve as it accelerates. At a $40,000 portfolio, a 20% drawdown represents $8,000 lost. The emotional pain registers at the equivalent of losing $18,000 in perceived psychological weight. Move the portfolio size to $1,200,000 and the 20% drawdown is $240,000. At the 2.25 loss aversion coefficient, that registers emotionally as the equivalent of losing $540,000. The curve does not scale linearly. It accelerates non-linearly against portfolio size. This explains, with mathematical precision, why wealthier people sometimes sleep worse during market corrections than people with modest savings. The anxiety is not irrational. It is prospect theory operating exactly as documented, at a larger scale. And the Vanguard Research Division quantified what structural behavioral discipline is worth against that anxiety. Their 2022 Advisor Alpha study found that behavioral coaching, preventing panic selling, maintaining rebalancing discipline, managing spending frameworks, adds approximately 150 to 300 basis points of net annualized return. On a $500,000 portfolio over 30 years, 2% additional return compounds into $362,000 in additional wealth. The cost of emotional decisions, tracked by Dalbar's annual quantitative analysis of investor behavior, shows the average investor underperforms their own funds by 1.5% to 4% annually. Over 30 years on a $200,000 portfolio, that behavioral gap exceeds $400,000. The biggest financial moves are the ones never made. Now the relationship architecture. Research published in the Journal of Economic Psychology found that the wealthier person in a friendship almost always manages the social friction of the wealth differential, alone. The burden falls upward. Every time. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory, established in 1954 and extended by Smith and Kim in 2007, documents that perceived wealth differential between peers activates competitive threat responses. The neurochemical mechanism involves cortisol elevation and oxytocin disruption in the social bonding circuits. Eisenberger's 2003 neuroscience research identified that social exclusion activates the same neural pain pathway as physical pain, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. Wealth differential between friends is measurably, biologically painful. Not metaphorically. Measurably. Notice this social network diagram. As the wealth differential between connected nodes increases, the relationship quality transitions from collaborative green through transactional yellow into hostile red. The pattern is not personal. It is social comparison theory operating at a neurochemical level. And the identity disruption that accompanies crossing wealth thresholds has a clinical name. Joan D. Furia's 2010 research documented what therapists working with high-net-worth clients now classify as sudden wealth syndrome, a condition characterized by isolation, guilt, paranoia, and identity confusion that affects not only lottery winners but gradual wealth builders who cross psychological thresholds. William Swann's self-verification theory from 1987 explains the underlying mechanism. People who built their identity around being strivers, workers, or working class experience genuine self-concept disruption when the wealth label begins to apply. The psychological timeline of this disruption moves through three measurable phases: pre-wealth identity stability, threshold crossing dissonance, and post-wealth identity reconstruction. The reconstruction does not happen automatically. It requires deliberate psychological navigation. Therapists who specialize in high-net-worth clients have named this. It is measurable, treatable, and more common than the personal finance landscape has ever acknowledged. Before this closes, the 6-step operational protocol built on the clinical and behavioral research covered here. Phase 1, automate contributions immediately, removing the limbic system from the decision loop entirely. Phase 2, calculate and record your current hedonic baseline before the next milestone, so the adaptation cycle is expected rather than experienced as failure. Phase 3, audit your peer group's wealth proximity annually, not to compete, but to understand the social comparison pressure your cortisol system is already processing. Phase 4, build a panic protocol before the next market correction, pre-committed written instructions specifying what you will not do when the portfolio drops 20%. Phase 5, consult a fee-only fiduciary CFP for the financial architecture. Phase 6, if crossing a significant wealth threshold produces identity dissonance, consult a therapist with documented high-net-worth specialization. Sudden wealth syndrome is treatable and recognized. Each of these steps housed inside its own execution framework, sequenced precisely. The progress bar completes here, not with a motivational statement, but with a map. The destination is real. The emotional journey is different than you were told. Now you have both the financial mechanics and the psychological terrain charted simultaneously. And the terrain is what every other channel left off the map. The systemic vulnerabilities operating on your wealth architecture do not stop at the psychological layer. There are documented structural financial traps, embedded in tax code, in Medicare premium determination, in IRA mechanics, that interact with every behavioral pattern mapped here. The analysis of exactly which ones your current portfolio is exposed to is built and waiting. Click now to examine the complete picture before the planning window closes.